Hello, I'm Vicki Tambardino, and I will be reading The Christmas Tree Ship by Carol Crane. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the popular German tradition of decorating an evergreen tree in the homes was widely practiced, and demand for Christmas trees was great. It was not uncommon for a handful of lake schooners to make late-season runs from North Michigan and Wisconsin before the worst storms and ice made travel too hazardous, loaded with thousands of Christmas trees for Chicago waterfront markets. Estimates of the number of Christmas schooners vary, but perhaps up to 24 vessels in any season delivered evergreen trees to markets in the Great Lakes areas. And if you notice, this is what one of the schooners would have looked like. In Chicago, most vessels, including the Roos Simmons, sold the trees directly to the berths along the Chicago River Clark Street docks. Electric lights were strung from the schooner's bow to stern, and customers were invited to board the ships to choose their trees. In addition to selling Christmas trees, many boat operators, including Schooneman, made and sold wreaths, garlands, and other holiday decorations. Barbara Schooneman and their 3 daughters helped make and sell these items as part of the family's holiday trade. At some stage of Herman Schooneman's long career as a late-season tree captain, he was given the title of Captain Santa. The affectionate nickname was bestowed by Chicago's local newspapers and by the city's grateful residents. Schooneman's profits from selling Christmas tree never made the family wealthy, but his reputation for generosity was well established, and he delighted in presenting trees to many of the city's needy residents. Schooneman enjoyed the sobriquet and proudly kept newspaper clippings about his role as Captain Santa in his oilskin wallet. On Friday, November 22nd, 1912, the Roos Simmons, heavily laden with 3,000 to 5,000 Christmas trees, filling in its cargo hold and covering its deck, left the dock at Thompson, Michigan. Some eyewitnesses said the Roos Simmons' departure claimed the ship looked like a floating forest. And here is a ship with a whole bunch of trees like it would have looked like. The Schooneman's departure, however, coincided with the beginning of a tremendous winter storm on the lake that sent several other ships to the bottom, including South Shore, 3 sisters, and 2 brothers. Barbara Schooneman and her daughters were concerned when the Roos Simmons failed to arrive in Chicago Harbor on schedule. However, it was not uncommon for a schooner to pull into a safe harbor to ride out a storm and then arrive days later at its destination. The family's worst fears were realized days later when still no word of the vessel had been received. Over the next weeks and months, remnants of Christmas trees washed ashore along Wisconsin's coastline. Astonishingly, the lake continued to give up clues long after the vessel's loss. In 1924, some fishermen in Wisconsin hauled in their nets and discovered a wallet wrapped in waterproof oilskin. Inside were the pristine contents that identified its owner as Herman Schooneman, the captain of Roos Simmons. The wallet was returned to the family. What caused the disaster that befell the Roos Simmons? There are several theories, but most likely a combination of circumstances or events drove the ship under the heavy seas. Among the factors are the possibility that the vessel lost its ship's wheel in the storm, its poor physical condition, heavy icing, and snow on the vessel's exterior and load, plus the 3,000 to 5,000 evergreen trees itself. With that, I have a few pictures of what it looked like when they found it under the water. And here is Schooneman and his family's over here. The story that I'm going to read to you today is called The Christmas Tree by Carol Crane. When Tim and I were boys, we lived with Grandpa Axel and Grandma Hannah in a lighthouse in Lake Michigan. We both loved to help Grandpa Axel with his job as a lighthouse keeper. I would carry Grandpa's toolbox so he could check the light and test the foghorn. Many times a ship passing by would toot its horn and the crew would wave at us. I especially loved it when the sailors saluted us. Grandpa taught us all about the water. He told us that Lake Michigan is like a child with many moods. Sometimes the mood is very, very good, and sometimes it's very, very bad. Grandpa could tell if a storm was brewing just by the feel of the wind. Wait long enough, he'd tell us, and the weather will change with the wind. One day just before Christmas, I could tell a storm was on its way. The crisp air and the our air had turned damp. The water near shore had become dark and greenish-colored froth. Black clouds quickly began to roll in. Tim and I figured that the lake sure was in a bad mood. Grandpa hurried us inside the warm kitchen before he got soaked. Grandma Hannah was baking a batch of her sweet-smelling ginger cookies, and my cousins were setting out glasses for milk. Grandpa Axel then sat down in his story rocker. It was a hand-carved chair, one he brought with him from Sweden. My cousin Tim and I gathered close to the chair. We each had our favorite story, but mine was the story of the Christmas tree ship. It must have been one of Grandpa's favorites too, because he looked at me, then smiled and winked as he picked up the carving and began speaking slowly, weaving again the tale that I loved so much. Every year, Captain Santa would load up his little schooner, Rose Simmons, with thousands of beautiful Christmas trees from our North Michigan forests. Now you children know the lake, and you know how stormy it is in November, but every year, Captain Santa braved the weather to bring those trees to the children of Chicago. This year, he told his wife Barbara that this was his final trip. He was growing old, and the Rose Simmons was growing old. And as much as he loved selling and giving things away, those Christmas trees, this year was going to be his last. He and his crew set off across the lake with 5,000 trees, all bundled tightly in the hold and lashed to the deck. The captain had sailed the lake all his life, and he knew when a storm was coming. He felt the winds change. He felt the dampness in the air, and he had all the sails hoist to race that storm across the lake. But the winds blew harder, and the sleet, ice, and snow covered that little schooner and her trees, and eventually pulled her under the water. Grandpa got up and walked over to the window. If you could see straight across the lake, he told us, you would see the shores of Wisconsin. A little to the south would be Two Rivers, Wisconsin, very near where the ship went down. After that, the winds from the southwest washed driftwoods and treasures from the Rose Simmons clear across the lake and onto our Michigan shores. I have something to show you, said Grandpa. The waves buried it in the sand for quite a few years, but the wind uncovered it. On this map right here is a little dot, and maybe they can show you later, is where the ship actually went down off the shores of Wisconsin. Grandpa pulled something out of his pocket. It was a corroded tag that said, Chicago Market, 1912. These copper straps were used to bundle Christmas trees together, he told us. Grandpa said that after the Rose Simmons went down, some of the trees were found still in their bundles. We pulled the trees out of the lake. In honor of the captain, everyone held up a tree and put it on the lighthouse for all to see. The next year, the children of Chicago were sad. Captain Santa would not arrive at the pier. But then, something wonderful happened. There, in the same spot, was another schooner laden with beautiful Christmas trees. Miraculously, the next year, an old schooner did appear, more at the same spot with trees. Who had anchored it there? The captain's wife, Barbara, and her daughter had decided the Christmas tree ship tradition would live on. Somehow, trees would be provided. For the brave heart of her husband recalling his true dedication, she brought trees from the north, a deed of respect and admiration. Grandpa had finished telling the story. Every year, one of Grandpa's carvings was hung on our Christmas tree. Eagerly waiting, we wiggled in anticipation of who would be chosen to add that wooden carving. That year, I got to hang the ornament, a replica of Captain Santa's schooner that once carried Christmas trees to Chicago. The events of this story are based in fact. My grandfather, Axel Anderson, loved to tell stories and would sit with my cousin and listen to many tales in Michigan. He had emigrated to the United States from Sweden with his new wife, Hannah, in 1882. The upper portion of lower Michigan must have reminded my grandfather of Sweden with its lakes, trees, and rolling hills. They settled in the Frankfurt area, and Grandfather took on jobs such as log setter, fisherman, and lighthouse signal repairman. As he shared his stories with us, Grandfather Anderson sat in his rocking chair, the one he had brought from Sweden, in a bag, and put back together, piece by piece. He fondly calls it his remembering chair. It was the only possession he had brought with him to America. I cherish my memories of Grandfather's stories, told with his Swedish accent, often around a campfire. I especially love hearing his story of Captain Schooneman bringing trees to waiting families in Chicago. And my grandfather did find trees scattered along the Michigan shoreline, bound with copper tags from the Ruth Simmons. My summers were spent on Lake Michigan, and looking out across that large expanse of sparkling water, I often wonder if at some time or another, a girl on the Wisconsin shore could be waving at me, standing on the Michigan shore. Carol Crane.